Well, let's move straight on. Let's go to our keynote speaker now. Public investments in education improve the level, quantity, and quality of human capital and thus contribute to economic growth. How could we make governments reconsider the value of education? Well, hopefully we'll answer that question as I introduce, first of all, our moderator who will be joining us in a few moments, who is Ellen Pinchuk, Deputy CEO of Micallef and Partners and former correspondent for Bloomberg News TV and Bureau Chief for CTV Canada in Moscow. She'll be the moderator, but before we hear from Ellen, I'd like to welcome on stage our keynote speaker, Cherie Blair CBE QC, Chancellor at the Asian University for Women and founder of the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women. Welcome, Cherie Blair.
Well, good morning, everybody. And how marvelous it is to be here at this inaugural Yidan Prize conference. When I was asked to speak today, I felt I couldn't say no, because my life was transformed by education. I come from a working class Liverpool family where my mother and my grandmother left school at 14, where my father left school at 16. But all of them wanted for myself and my sister to have those educational opportunities that they had missed out on. And I was lucky, because I was born when I was, where I was, at a time when opportunities for girls like me were opening up. I got to a convent grammar school for free. I went to the London School of Economics to read law for free. I went on to read for the Bar of England and Wales for free. And without that, I would never have met and married my husband and ended up doing 10 years in 10 Downing Street, or being here with you today. And that journey is reflected in some ways on the global level, because we have made incredible progress in education. We see it particularly in primary school education. In the 1960s, fewer than half the developing world's children were enrolled in primary school. Today, more than 90% are in many regions. And in many regions, there's a higher percentage of girls rather than boys that are enrolled. And the education is provided by the government free of charge. And that's a tribute to the government and to the organizations who have campaigned, emphasizing the importance of education for personal, national, and international development. But, and there's always a but, there is so much more to do until we reach the position where every child, wherever they're born, can reach their full potential. And that's why we cannot underestimate the importance of this prize and its stress on new ideas and innovation, and its recognition of people who've made such a profound impact on education through their creativity and entrepreneurship. And I know everybody here, like me, must have been so privileged to hear the stories of Professor Carol Dweck and Mrs. Vicky Colbert. I was just amazed to hear them speak. Carol's ideas on the growth versus fixed mindset really resonated with me, and I know they've resonated across the world with so many educators and parents who think about how to get the best out of their children. And her work has had such a significant impact. Sometimes I think, somehow or other, without even knowing it, I benefited from those ideas of growth, a growth mindset. And that's how I managed to progress, thanks to my schooling, thanks to my university, thanks to those who encouraged me at a time when only 10% of women went to the Bar of England and Wales, to think that I could do it. And you know, education took me on that journey. And it was only when I finished education and tried to enter the actual workforce that suddenly I found there was a problem. And that problem was, back in the 1970s, the attitude was, well, girls, they don't really do law. And I've spent the rest of my career challenging that and fighting for girls not just to be educated, but also to be allowed to put that education into practice. And you know, even today, we find many girls across the world who are educated, in the Middle East, for example, and yet, at the end of their education, are expected to go back into the home and not to contribute to the wider economy. Or I was just recently in India. Do you know that 65% of Indian girls with college degrees are not working? Why is that? It's because attitudes towards women and their place in the world. And of course then, we heard from Vicky and her marvelous creative approach to education. For education for those children in areas that are often neglected, in the rural areas, where the power of education hasn't fully been realized, and to develop a model that not only delivers affordable, quality, and relevant education, but which is geared to these neglected children, is such a solution, not just in South America, but around the world today. So the Yidan Prize is truly visionary and has recognized truly visionary educationalists. And it's particularly visionary when you think that when we consider the power of education and yet look at the resources going into education, the two are very different. For example, in America today, the corporations contribute about $7 billion annually to global health. And how much do they contribute to education in developing countries? $500,000, a huge disparity. In the aid budgets across the world, the education share of total aid has actually fallen in the 6 years between 10% in 2009 to 6.9% in 2015. And if you examine that money, you'll find that most of it has gone on primary education, and the amount allocated to secondary education and beyond has actually fallen further back in 2015 to the levels of 2009. But you know, education isn't just about quantity, it's about quality. And though many more children today receive education than 30 years ago, I have to tell you, and you know, that the quality of that education does not correspond with that increase in quantity. And that too is something that we have to tackle. There are often not enough trained teachers to meet the demand. So we have overcrowded classrooms, underqualified teachers, and a diminished quality of individual education. So governments may be happy that they tick the box, they've got more children in school, but as educators, we have to be disappointed with the overall learning outcomes. And education also suffers from an issue of equity and access. Women's enrollment in secondary schools has increased dramatically, and in many countries, the gender gap in secondary school has disappeared. Yet, it's not the case all over the world. There still are the cultural expectations for girls to get married too young as teenagers and then miss out on education. In some parts of the world, education is positively dangerous for teenage girls. Each year, approximately 60 million girls are sexually assaulted on their way to school. But secondary education is so important for their future. The positive effects of secondary education on productivity, child survival, health, and political participation are well documented. As women's education levels rise, fertility rates decline, and life expectancy for women and children rises. Higher rates of education for women are also linked with a lower risk of disease transmission, especially in developing countries. And it goes beyond just health. Educated women are better informed about their rights, more likely to exercise them, and more likely to have their voices heard in the formal political system. Now, primary education, especially for girls, has come to play a critical role in the international development agenda. But it's becoming increasingly apparent that primary education alone is not enough. We need secondary and indeed higher levels of schooling to improve the options, the opportunities, and the outcome for women. And yet women are much less likely to attend college or university than they are to attend secondary school, and in most Asian countries, they're much less likely to attend college or university than their brothers. Ultimately, financial constraints are there as a key barrier to accessing higher education, and that's why philanthropic attention to quality and access to education needs to be directed. However, there's another power of education that we have to consider. It may not be so easy to measure as enhanced productivity and increased incomes and better quality life. It's the public power of education. The power of education that teaches us norms and values. Students, through interaction with a wide variety of subjects and perspectives, will notice when something is wrong in the world and add their voices to challenge that. It allows them to be connected with the movements of the world and teaches them to use that privilege with respect and caution. These learning experiences prepare our young people to be leaders, to explore their passions and interests, to discover the issues which move them and the ideologies that do not. Nourished by education, students are empowered to participate as fully engaged citizens and to hold the powerful to account. Thus, we have this two-pronged power of education to be instrumental and influential. And that is why the bold vision of Dr. Charles Chan Yidan in creating this sustainable international prize is so important. I've been fortunate to be part of one educational project that has successfully addressed two of these key issues of quality and access. And it's what gives me hope that these are solvable problems. For the past 6 years, I've been Chancellor of the Asian University for Women. It's an international liberal arts university in Chittagong in Bangladesh. The AUW, for short, is the first of its kind, global in outlook, but rooted in the context and aspirations of the people of Asia. To date, the university has educated over 1,200 women from 15 different Asian countries, 35 ethnicities, and 5 religions. Its centralizing ethos is the idea that interaction with difference in the context of a liberal arts education empowers our students to become empathetic, change-driven leaders in their communities and in the world. AUW's core objective aims to relieve the stubborn issues of equality and access within higher education. By recruiting a highly educated and international faculty, AUW promises a quality of university education that's proven competitive with other liberal arts universities in the US and Europe. AUW focuses too on job readiness and professional education that helps our girls make a real contribution to their societies. Access is a primary goal. By specifically recruiting from the underserved communities, such as displaced women. We have women from the Rohingya community in our university, not just this year, but since the beginning. Women from the ready-made garment factories who've had to leave education to support their families, bringing them back into the precious gift of education. And rural, remote communities. And we've done that by preparing supplementary preparatory programs and funding them with 100% scholarships. We are trying to reach that last mile of tertiary education. And we've shown that we can provide anyone who has the raw talent, the enthusiasm, and the grit with a high level of undergraduate preparedness. About 85% of AUW's graduates return to their home countries with a mission to solve the problems of their communities, and they want to create a positive impact on the world. And in some ways, the AUW is a contrarian approach in development circles, which may partly explain the challenges that we have faced. The development community often seems prone to offer bottom-of-the-rack services to the poor. The poor cannot access banking services, so we offer them microfinance. They can't get proper jobs, so we establish food-for-work programs. They can't access proper schooling, so we offer them non-formal education. The AUW insists that talent and excellence is as prevalent among the underserved as in any other group, and that they too are deserving of the best that society can offer. And often, the best may not be low cost, but nevertheless, it's an investment which is vital for our society's futures. And this is particularly important when we look at leadership from among groups who might otherwise be precluded from full participation. And I'm so pleased that here today in the room I'm joined by one of our wonderful graduates of 2017. Sonia Sharif is here because, having graduated, she's come to Hong Kong to participate in an internship program set up by Marriott International for our students. And also Linan Davis is here, who is the head of the AUW support group here in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong has been tremendously generous to the AUW. And I know today we're going to consider technology. Technology which has incredible potential to remedy the roadblocks in educational progress. And we're only at the beginning of finding out what it can do. We must continue to wonder how we can use technology to make the most impact, to enhance the learning of all our children, particularly those in secondary school. How can we use technology to mitigate the issues of high demand and low resources at primary school level? But I also believe that education is lifelong, and that simply because at a younger age you may have missed out on good quality education does not mean that you're condemned forever not to be able to have those opportunities. And this is why the foundation that bears my name has concentrated so much on using technology to provide financial and business education to women entrepreneurs in the developing and emerging markets, to enable them to have that access to the information, to the networks, to the mentoring that will equip them to become experts in their field. Technology here, we've found, has been an amazing connective device, a beacon of information, and a symbol of modern progress. And I look forward to hearing this afternoon and over these days about other concrete solutions when technology can provide a solution for all. So, we have cause to celebrate, we should celebrate, that global education has improved. But we can't become comfortable with the statistic. We have to use this upward trend to motivate the continuing growth of education with a steady injection of new ideas, creative leaders, and valuable philanthropic support. We can indeed live up to the inspiration of Dr. Charles Chen Yidan to ensure that every child climbs to that top of that mountain of opportunity for the benefit of his family, for the benefit of her community, and for the benefit of our amazing world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherie, for that wonderful speech. What a way to start off the day, huh? I have a quick question for you. You have seen all sides of the aisle. You're working now through your NGO, but you've also been very close to the halls of power. Obviously, whenever we're talking about introducing change in the scope that we're discussing here, you're going to encounter a lot of resistance. So what is the secret? Share it with us. How do you achieve your results and get everybody on board with you?
I'm not sure I know the secret. All I know is that I just don't believe in giving up. My husband sometimes calls me a bolshy scouser, which those of you who know the UK will understand. It means that sometimes we're pig-headed in our determination not to be put down. We just cannot take the situation as it is as a situation which it's always got to be. We've always got to push to get better and for change. So resilience is so important, and the determination to see this through to the end.
When you discuss the issue of education, when we discuss it, obviously we're talking about a huge number of stakeholders. You've got educators themselves, you've got parents and students, you've got the private sector, you've got the public sector, you've got business. If we speak about the role of government and good governance in this area, what do you see as the primary policy points that need to be in place to set us up for the next generation of good education?
Well, I certainly believe in the state as an enabler of excellence. And, you know, to reach the scale, you have to have buy-in from the government. After all, the government represents the people.
And has the tax money.
And the government has the resources. Of course it has the resources. But I do think that the private sector and philanthropy has a big role to play in being the innovators, in pushing the ideas, in stretching the imagination. And that's why this prize is important, because it's a considerable sum of money, and it gets people's attention. And we are talking about it. This will get attention across the world and make people think, these are great ideas. What can we do? How can we achieve it here? And it has to make governments think. And obviously most governments will be responsive to public demand. But it's sad, isn't it, as I said in my speech, that at the moment, whether it's in aid money, or whether it's in resources in education in my own country, we seem to think that we can skimp on education and that somehow or other we'll get by. And the truth is, the children of the rich will get by. But that doesn't mean that that's the same for the children of those who don't have those extra resources. And we have to do something to intervene, because we're just wasting the talent of the world.
Your foundation, obviously dedicated to the development of women, largely from an economic point of view. When you talk about education for women to set them up for that economic achievement, there seems to be now sort of a division of the roads here. A lot of talk about STEM education and improving access to STEM and interest in STEM for women, but also at the same time the issue of liberal arts education, and do we preserve that when you were speaking about in your speech, for example, the role of good citizenship and people being involved and critical thinkers and able to address the world's problems and know how to go about that. Do you feel it's a question of sort of focusing on one or the other, or can you do both? What is your priority?
I refuse to believe that we have to accept that if you're interested in STEM or scientists, that somehow or other you're not also an engaged citizen in the world. And our scientists, our engineers equally have inquiring minds and are interested in challenging power. So we have to concentrate on making sure that children have that quality of education that allows them to make their decisions wisely and understand and challenge when they see things that are wrong.
Your foundation will celebrate 10 years next year, if I'm correct, yes? And we're here at the inaugural Yidan Prize Summit. What advice can you give to Charles, who's here present with us, and to all those assembled here about the way forward?
Well, first of all, Charles, leadership is important, and you've shown that. I actually think specialization is important. So for you to pick on education and to specialize in that, I think is key. You can become a real thought leader in this. You can assemble together the amazing people you've got in this room, and next year they'll be even more amazing, and the year after that. And you can build on the wonderful people that we've heard of, like Carol and Vicky. And they were already telling me, I probably shouldn't say this because I'll probably tell you, that they want to work together to make what you've already started, what you seeded, even more impactful because they can come together. This is an amazing initiative, and I know that with your belief in the longevity of the plan, so it's not just a prize for today, it's not even just a prize for the next decade, it's a prize that is going to make an impact over a lifetime, and I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Cherie Blair, and for being here, for sharing your ideas with us and your experience and your wisdom. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cherie Blair, who is Chancellor of the Asian University for Women and founder of the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women. And great to hear that her husband calls her a Bolshie Scouser.